just becomes a power struggle, and it's not going to be good after that. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Destiny, and I'm a high school English teacher in North Carolina. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thanks for supporting my YouTube channel. So today in this video, I'm gonna tell you guys my top 5 classroom management strategies. Before we get started, I just want to put out there that I'm not an expert. This is only my 5th year of teaching, but these are some of the things that I've learned along the way, and hopefully they'll be able to help you out as well. If I leave anything out, let me know in the comments below. And while you're doing stuff, make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure you got those bell notifications on, and that you're following me over on Instagram, because that's where all the good stuff happens. I did actually put this on my Instagram and asked you guys if you wanted to see classroom management strategies or if you wanted to see grading hacks, and this is what you voted for, so let's get into the video. So tip number 1 that I have for you guys is to build relationships with your students. So that may seem like a no-brainer to you, but it's really important, and I thought that it was worth putting on this list because that's really how you're gonna reach your students, is by building relationships with them. So the expression Maslow's before Bloom's, basically that building a relationship with a student is more important than getting the content across to them, because sometimes if you don't have a relationship with that student, it may be difficult for you to teach them or for them to learn from you. Something that you can do tomorrow that will help you build relationships with your students is just by greeting them at the door. So I shake everyone's hand, or we fist bump, or some kids I have a handshake with, and I tell them things like, it's good to see you, or I'm glad that you're here. I can't wait for you to see our lesson today. And I think that enthusiasm and like genuine wanting to get to know them, it really makes a difference, and I think that they can appreciate that and they really see that. Some of the worst advice ever that I've heard is don't smile until Christmas. It's common to hear that when you first start teaching, that you have to be tough and that you shouldn't smile until Christmas, but honestly, who can go that long without smiling? You want for your kids to know that you're serious about your rules, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in this list, but at the same time, you don't want to be so tough to where they don't want to get to know you. It makes you seem impersonal and cold, and you know, I wouldn't want to be friends with anybody who couldn't smile for like the first 4 months of school. Tip number 2 that I have for you guys is to have clear expectations and behavior norms. So when I say that, I mean that you should be setting the expectations of what students can anticipate in your class and what you expect of them, as well as what they can expect from you. So 2 ways that I do that are, one, with social contracts. So social contracts, at least the way that I found out about them, was through Capturing Kids' Hearts. In my 5 years of teaching, this was the most useful PD that I've ever attended. Honestly, it really gave me a lot of tools for building relationships with students and how I can do that and how I can create that inclusive, welcoming culture into my classroom. So if you've never done social contracts before, basically it's just things that you expect from each other. So things like respect, hands and feet to themselves, the golden rule, everyone puts forth their best effort, maturity, and you get these ideas from the students, and when you allow for them to be a part of the process in building the expectations for the classroom, they're gonna be able to meet those expectations because they were a part of creating them. Not just with social contracts, but just setting expectations before you do assignments. So for example, this past week we did poetry stations, and so before we started the stations, I asked my students, what can we do for us to have successful stations? And the number 1 answer was to focus, and I just wrote that on the board and wrote like a couple of check marks just to acknowledge that multiple people had said that. And then they said things like giving your best effort, everyone in the group does their part, and then we set a limit for the volume. So if I told them, you know, 1 is whispering, 10 is yelling, where can we expect for our class volume to be? We decided on that we would stay between 5 and 7. Once we did the actual stations and they got a little bit loud, I just kind of used our expectations to redirect the students. So I told them, you know, all right, this sounds louder than a 7 to me. Can we bring the volume down just a little bit? and had kids apologizing, oh, sorry, oh, we'll be at a 7 next time. And that they were a part of building those expectations and the rule making. So I think that really means a lot to students, and it helps them want to follow those rules because they set them themselves. When you're setting those expectations, you also want to make sure that you're taking the responsibility of being a part of the class. It's our space. That not only are you holding those students accountable for those expectations, but they're also expectations for you as the teachers. It's an inclusive environment in terms of responsibility of the behavior and how things go during class. Tip number 3 that I have for you is mastering your movement. So you want to have organized approaches to when there's movement in your classroom. So for example, the highest number of kids that I have in one class is 28. So if we all moved at the same time, it would just be chaotic and anarchy. That's almost 30 bodies, including myself and my co-teacher. And so, I just try to take more systematic and organized approaches to allowing movement within the classroom. And so one way that I do that is just with signal phrases. So for example, when I'm giving directions, I'll say, when I say go, when I ask you to do so, in just a moment, I'll ask you to move. They're not moving in that moment, but they're about to move and transition. And so they need to be listening to the directions. And I'll make sure the students are engaged and are actually listening to the directions by asking them, look at me so I know that you're listening. That way I know that I have their undivided attention, and I can give directions hopefully only once. And I see that students are modeling the behavior that I would like them to during that moment of transition, then I will say, thank you, student. And I feel like that seems a little elementary, but even in high school, students still want to feel like they're being recognized, and so they want to be thanked as well. So as soon as you start saying, oh, thank you, student A, thank you, student B, then you'll see that students are kind of doing what they need to do to transition even faster, so that you can maybe tell them thank you as well. Another way that I try to master my movement is by using little squares that I have on their desk. So each one is a different color. We have different table jobs in our classroom because we do interactive notebooks. So one person gets the glue, one person gets the materials, one person throws away all the trash, then we have team captain. I also use those squares to try to master those movements. So I'll say, all of my oranges, you can put away your notebook, or all of my blues, you can come and get a paper. That way that not everybody in the classroom is moving at once, and that way it's a little bit more organized. I also try to master the movement by using timers. So timers are super, super important. If you're not using them in your classroom, I would definitely recommend that tomorrow when you start your lessons that you're using the timers for any part of your lesson. For example, their warm up, I give them 6 minutes. You have 6 minutes to come in, get out your materials, do what you need to do, and answer the questions for we call it night's charge. I also will count down during transitions, from 10. If I'm telling them, oh, I need you to get with a partner, you have 10 seconds to do so. I audibly will count down from 10 so that they're moving very quickly. Because sometimes you'll find that if you say, okay, I need you to get with a partner, that some kids just want to sit in their seats. They're kind of looking around oh, hey, friend, are we gonna be together? Or, they're trying to decide who they're gonna work with. But if you count down from 10 or 15 or 20, however long you want to do it, but if you're counting down, then the students will kind of be a little bit more expedited and have that sense of urgency, as well as using those timers. So if they have 20 minutes to work on an assignment, and then I put up the timer and I try to give them time cues throughout the lesson. So oh, you have 5.5 minutes left. And this trick that I actually learned from Gordon Ramsay, because I've been watching lots of MasterChef. He say that they have 60 minutes to work on something. So 20 minutes goes by and he says you have 40 minutes left and 20 minutes has gone by. And so I've been starting to do that in my classroom, and I've seen really successful results because the students kind of learn their own pacing. So if I say, okay, out of a 40-minute assignment, 10 minutes has gone by, you have 30 minutes left. Then like I did that the other day and one kid just was like, oh my God, what have I been doing for 10 minutes? And I'm like, I'm not sure, you know, do you need some help getting started? And then it not only lets me know as the teacher, like where the kids are at with their pacing, but it allows for them to be a little bit more self-sufficient and kind of think about their own pacing themselves. I did talk about the Gordon Ramsay kind of trick on my Instagram. So if you're not following me on Instagram, make sure that you are, because that's where all the good stuff happens. I'm super active on that community, so make sure to give me a follow. So the fourth tip that I have for you guys is to avoid conflict. So you definitely want to try to avoid conflict when it's possible. Sometimes it does come up. And so just making sure that the kids know that you're on their side and that you're like, you know, really concerned with what they need and what's going on, as opposed to, you know, it becoming a power struggle between student and teacher. And you definitely want to make sure that it is not a power struggle between the student and the teacher in front of the whole class. That is going to cause many more problems after that one incident. It just becomes a power struggle, and it's not going to be good after that. You may see the same type of behavior coming up, or you may experience more conflict. Just, I would avoid a power struggle between you and any student, or if you have like a co-teacher or anything like that, you just definitely want to avoid having open conflict where everyone can witness that. So one thing that I do to kind of avoid that is that I just ask students to step outside of the classroom, and I remind them all the time that, you know, it doesn't mean that you're in trouble, it just means that I want to have a private conversation with you. I usually give the kids like just a minute to be out there by themselves, that way they can kind of cool off, and then that way I can find a place to kind of transition and step outside of the classroom. I do have a co-teacher, which makes it super helpful. You know, we're a great team, and she just kind of picks up exactly where we are and then allows for me to step out of the classroom with the student. Now, I understand that not everybody has that opportunity, but you can kind of give the student a few minutes outside of the classroom just so that they can kind of cool down and be ready to talk to you about whatever issue had come up, and then you can give yourself some time to kind of transition into your next activity. When you do go outside with the student, it's really important to be concise and direct. So 2 ways that I do that, I say, I've noticed, or I feel. And I'm always sure to tell the students that these are my feelings. They could be wrong, but I just want to be on the same page, and I'm being open and transparent with you, and I'd like for you to do the same. So say, for example, you have a student who is not doing their work. You've gone over and, you know, asked them like, okay, what question are you on? Tell me how your work is going. Tell me some questions that you have. But they just repeatedly are not doing their work. You ask them to step outside, and you could say something like, I've noticed that you haven't started your work yet and 10 minutes has gone by. I need for you to get started. Would you like my help? You use that I feel statement or I've noticed, and then it's always followed by I need, because you want to be direct and you want to be concise. Tell the students what you're expecting for them to do once you step back into the classroom and what your needs are as the teacher. I have seen a lot of success with using those statements, and you know, you can apply those statements to all aspects of your life, like, you know, with your marriage or with relationships with your friends, or anything that, you know, you want to be clear and concise about how you feel and what your needs are and what's going on, and show them that respect of kind of human to human. And I use that phrase a lot. I'll say, okay, let's have a human to human chat. I've noticed this. I need this. That way the student knows exactly what to expect once they come back into the classroom. After the conference outside of the classroom, your school may have a specific discipline plan that they want you to follow. Like, for example, at my school, we have restorative practices, and we use the 4 questions and try to do lots of conferencing. Afterwards, it would kind of be at administrative or teacher discretion. How your school handles discipline is going to be different across the board, but with all of these tips, just make sure that you are doing what's right for you and what's right for your school. When I step outside of the classroom with the student, I usually start with, are you all right? More than half of the time, students usually have something else going on, because behavior, as we know as teachers, is a response. So, for example, a student had a really rough morning, maybe they got into a disagreement with their parents at home, and you've got them first block, and so they're just in a terrible mood. That may come out when you're asking them to do something. They could just be having a bad day. And so I try to start out with, are you all right? And usually if something's going on, the student and I will just kind of talk about it and like, oh, okay, I understand. I want you to remember that I'm not the one that you're upset with. Like, is there something I can do for you? I've seen a lot of success with that as well. And the last tip that I have for you guys, number 5, is to be consistent. So when I say be consistent, I mean you should be consistent with your policies. You should be consistent with the way that you respond to behavior. For example, if you have a cell phone policy that cell phones are not allowed in the classroom unless used for educational purposes, you repeatedly have students who don't follow that cell phone policy, don't feel like you have to lower your expectations or that you have to change your rules just because an approach isn't working. You can change your approach, but I would stay consistent to your rules. And I'm not saying that after reflection or thinking about how things run in your classroom that you can't change things, because that's not what I mean at all. I'm just saying that, if you set forth a policy in the beginning of the school year, you want to try to stick to that policy the best that you can so that they can see that consistency. You also want to be consistent with the way that you respond to behavior. So say, for example, a student is talking while you're talking in front of the class and you're giving direct instruction. If you maybe walk over to them like as you're still lecturing, they stop talking, and then another student starts to do that, but you reprimand them publicly in front of the class, that's not consistent, and a student may feel like you're playing favorites or that they can't trust you, or it's definitely going to impact your relationship with that one student if you reprimanded them and you didn't reprimand somebody else. So try to stay consistent with the way that you respond to behavior, just so that the student feels like there is that level of trust there and that you're being consistent with the way that you treat everyone in the classroom. I would also make sure that you're including some sort of equitable practices within your classroom, again, so that students don't feel like you're playing favorites or that you're not giving everyone an equal opportunity, or that you're not just reprimanding a specific race or a specific group. Just make sure that you are remaining consistent, and be consistent in a more positive way. That, like I said, greeting your students at the door. I'm there at the door every single day for my students. They know that when they walk into my classroom that they'll be greeted with a smile, and I'll shake their hand and tell them I'm glad to see you. This is where I'm going to close out the video. I hope that you guys like these tips. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. I hope that you enjoyed this. Again, please don't forget to click that subscribe button. Make sure those bell notifications are on, and make sure that you're following me over on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a great day.